There we go. Apologies for that, everyone. Good evening, one and all. It's 5:30, so we'll make a start. Welcome to the Planning Committee meeting of the 31st of March 2025. I'd like to welcome members of the public, councillors and officers to this meeting. I now call upon the clerk, who will advise how the meeting will be run this evening.
Thank you, Chair. Please note that we are live streaming this meeting via the Council's YouTube channel to encourage more people to engage in our public meetings. The proceedings of the meeting will also be recorded. Please can I remind everyone to use their microphones when speaking and turn them off when finished. Please can attendees in person refrain from watching the live stream. This will cause interference for our viewers. Please can you also ensure that your mobile phones and iPads are turned to silent. We are not expecting any fire alarm testing today. In the event of an evacuation, please leave by the nearest exit and gather in the car park next to the library opposite Tesco. In accordance with the Constitution, members of the public who have registered to speak will be permitted to do so when invited by the Chair. Please note that registered speakers are not permitted to approach committee members or distribute documentation to the committee during the course of the meeting. The application will be dealt with in the following order. The planning officer will present the submitted application and will outline the proposed recommendation in full. Any speakers registered to speak on the application will be invited to address the committee. This will be taken in the following order. Speakers against, neighbourhood forums representatives, any councillors who are not members of the committee, followed by speakers in support of the application. All speakers will have a maximum of 5 minutes each to address the meeting. This will be followed by questions from members and responses from the planning officer. Once questions from the committee have concluded, the Chair will open the application for debate. At the conclusion of the debate, the Chair will seek a proposer and seconder for the application. The proposal must be in full and include all information, such as conditions or reasons. The Chair will then confirm with the planning officer if they wish to enter into a period of summing up. Members, if at any point you leave the meeting for any reason during the consideration of the application, you will be unable to vote on that application. I will now hand the chair of the meeting to the Chair, Councillor Brooke.
Thank you, Clerk. Just ask any apologies or updates to the membership of the committee, please.
Yes, Chair. We have apologies from Councillors Pentney and Strang. In accordance with the wishes of the Conservative Group, the membership of the committee has been amended to include Councillor Bly in place of Councillor Strang.
Thank you. Looking on the minutes now, to confirm as a record the minutes of our meeting of the committee held on the 3rd of March 2025. Can I have a proposer? Thank you, Councillor Fox. Can I have a seconder? Councillor Tolchard. All those in favour? Excellent. Moving on now to declarations of interest. Do any members of the Planning Committee have any pecuniary or non-pecuniary interests on any of the items on today's agenda? Please raise your hand. So I'm raising my hand. I'm a board member of the English Riviera Bid Company. And any officers have any pecuniary or non-pecuniary interests on any of the items? Well, one item today. No, thank you very much. Are there any urgent items?
No, Chair.
Thank you. Beg your pardon, Councillor Darling.
Councillor Brooke, can I just go back slightly to the makeup of the meeting? We know we do not have Councillor Verdi with us here today, but I believe Councillor George Darling is subbing in his place. Maybe the minutes might like to share that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Darling. Yeah, I raised this before the meeting, but we knew that Councillor Darling was standing in and his name's on the actual papers. Right, moving on to item 5. This is to consider an application for land at Prince's Garden off Torbay Road, Torquay. Planning reference number is P/2025/0061. The clerk has just said to confirm registered to speak upon entry at the meeting. I therefore call upon Mr. Scott Jones to introduce the application. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Firstly, as an update to members, since the committee report was drafted, we've received some further representations. Firstly, we've had 3 additional letters of objection from the Torbay Heritage Trust. And these submissions principally cover comments on the impacts on the various heritage assets, conflict with the Torbay Green Space strategy in terms of specifically improving the appearance of the green spaces, improving perceptions of green space to increase visits, developing opportunities for green space to be used for learning and protecting heritage assets. Comments on the wording within this submitted master plan for the registered park was also made, and also some comments on the impact on the various heritage assets themselves in terms of the conservation area, the listed buildings, the listed garden context, cultural tourism, in terms of the harm to the Agatha Christie Trail, impacts of parking, and the role of heritage in terms of economic value itself. The submissions do not alter the conclusions made within the report and a recommendation being made to members. There's also been 1 further letter of objection in terms of the development being on local green space, which should not be developed, and being detrimental to the conservation area. There's also been 13 letters of support, all principally covering the development being positive in terms of tourism and for locals, not being harmful to the area, actually pays for improvements to the area, and is an iconic feature for the bay. So moving on to the presentation, this first slide shows the site of the development, which is in its previous location down at Princess Gardens, outlined in red here, between the theatre and the listed war memorial here, and also includes these red areas here, which is areas where there's proposed tree planting as part of the development proposals. This is just an aerial view of the development site showing a previous iteration of the wheel in place, which is a slightly smaller version of the 45-metre wheel that's currently proposed. I think this is the 33-metre wheel that was in situ 1 year. To the east, you've got the listed pavilion here. Between that, you've got the fountain and the war memorial, which are also listed structures within the registered park and garden. And in terms of the context of the development plan, this map principally shows it's in a listed park and garden, is within the Torquay Harbour Conservation Area, is also within a core tourism investment area, and is in a community investment area as well. In terms of the Torquay neighbourhood plan, this is a designations map for the area, and the principal component that it covers is it's part of a local green space. Just moving on to some slides of the location itself. This is obviously this is the development area of the wheel, looking towards the Princess Theatre and outwards towards the sea. And just in terms of some context, we've got here the listed fountain, which is post-improvements. And this is pre-improvements. Obviously, previous iterations of the wheel has provided some conservation gains to pay for these improvements within the registered park and garden as part of the conservation mitigation. Also, previous funding has provided renovation funding for the listed war memorial here. So we've got a before and after photo. So moving on, this is the existing layout of the area of Princess Garden. So basically we've got the theatre to one side and the War Memorial, and then the edge of the banjo here, and then the mature London plane trees along Torbay Road here. So this is the proposed layout. Obviously sited away from the main thoroughfare through the this area of the park. As mentioned, it's a 43-metre radius wheel. The corner of the base is approximately 24 metres from the listed War Memorial. And the ticket office proposed as part of the development is sited within the footprint of the wheel around here. And then we've got the catering unit on the seaward side, just here. So there's some simple elevations of the wheel. And the ticket office, it's a similar size to previous proposals. So it's quite small, it's 3.5 metres by 3.5 metres footprint and 2.5 metres high. And this is the other structure proposed. This is the catering unit. That's 6 metres wide by 2.5 metres deep and 3.7 metres high to the top of the fixed signage. Sorry about the quality of this slide picture, but this is just the proposed layout again. So moving on, part of the proposals is to provide some heritage funding towards improvements within the registered park and garden. And this is an extract from the updated master plan report. Within the report, it mentioned various objectives to obviously previously enhance the War Memorial, improve the footpaths network within the gardens, and where possible reduce some of the extent of paving. Also to develop some interpretation strategy and signage within the registered park, and help to develop a design for the pavilions, and consider its linkages to Princess Gardens. So this area here, with the dashed lines, is the proposed internal network of footpaths, which is being proposed as part of the next phase of the heritage funding. So this is some indicative pictures of some sort of heritage-based resin bonded to replace existing sort of red tarmac that is prevalent through the registered park. In terms of the key issues that are summarised and explored in the committee report, the principle of a temporary provision of an observation wheel and ancillary development is considered to align with the development plan aspirations in terms of supporting and promoting tourism facilities and the management of local green spaces. In terms of heritage impacts, the wheel is considered to present a high level of less than substantial harm. And this harm needs to be considered against the tourism and economic benefits and other material considerations. In accordance with the requirement of the MPPF, great weight should be afforded the conservation of heritage assets. However, the proposal does include an amount of funding to the sum of £110,000 over the time period of the permission for improvement works to mitigate that harm. However, the heritage advice is that such benefit is low. It does sit as a minor benefit to the significance of the registered park as a whole, and this view is reiterated in Historic England's comments, who retain a strong concern regarding the continued presence of the wheel within the park. In terms of design more broadly, the location is considered suitable when considering it doesn't impact the main routes and desire lines through the park and garden. It does remove a relatively substantial part of the park from casual informal enjoyment throughout the summer months. However, there is such areas within the park that are retained for such purposes, and it does provide a public facility whilst in place. Generally, the development is suitable for the context of a public park. Moving on in terms of amenity, subject to an hours of operation restriction and lighting restrictions, as previously imposed, the wheel would not unduly impact the amenity of neighbouring occupiers and users. In terms of trees, there is support from the council's tree officer, and there is no expected harmful impacts on the mature street trees within the area. And there is a suggested condition to protect trees whilst the wheel is constructed and dismantled at the end of each season. In terms of ecology and the marine environment, the development is temporary and it sits within a managed parkland, and the development itself sits as a temporary structure there. There's no expected harm to ecology or the marine environment, and as part of the proposals there is to propose tree planting to secure a net gain for biodiversity. Finally, in terms of flood risk, the surface water runoff from the new development will be discharged to a soakaway, and the development is not expected to increase the risk of flooding and has the support of the council's drainage officer. So in terms of the officer recommendation, take into account the planning history, the recommendation is one of approval, subject to the prior to the grant of planning permission, a conservation mitigation obligation to the sum of £110,000 be secured through a legal agreement for improvement works identified within the submitted Princess Gardens Master Plan Update Report for the registered park and garden, and the conditions as outlined, with the final drafting of conditions delegated to the Divisional Director of Planning, Housing and Climate Emergency, and the resolution of any new material considerations that may come to light following Planning Committee to be delegated to the Divisional Director for Planning, Housing and Climate Emergency, including the addition of any necessary further planning conditions and obligations. And I'll just finish with the recommended conditions that are in the committee report. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jones. And we have no speakers against committee, so I will need to read out a representation we've received in support of the application on behalf of Torquay Neighbourhood Forum. And it is as follows. The steering group of the Torquay Neighbourhood Forum submitted a consultee response supporting the proposed temporary location of the wheel in Princess Gardens. The economic benefits and provision of the tourist offering, in our opinion, outweigh the heritage concerns. The Forum supports the case officer's recommendation for approval with the stated conditions. So I'm now going to call upon Mr. John Pope to address the meeting in support of the application. I believe Mr. Pope is joining us via Zoom.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yep. Mr. Pope, you have 5 minutes, and the clerk will let you know when you have 1 minute remaining.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon, members, and thank you for the opportunity to speak in support of our planning application, which requests temporary permission for the siting of an observation wheel in the Princess Gardens for 4 seasonal years. This consent will bring the planning permission in line with the 5-year contract that has already been agreed with the council. The wheel has been a seasonal iconic feature of the Torquay seafront for several years and has acted as a magnet for drawing in tourism, investment and local spending. Visitors using the wheel have been enjoying a unique panoramic view over the town and have been capturing inspirational photographs of the townscape and seafront. The impressive heritage-led achievements that have been made possible by the wheel can be summarised as follows. Just short of £130,000 has been secured by the wheel in previous years, which has directly funded the restoration and repair of the listed water fountain. We are advised that this is the only working water fountain of its kind in the UK, and the wheel has funded the repair works. £40,000 has also been secured from planning permissions for the wheel, which have been used specifically for restoration and repair work to the listed war memorial. These have now been completed, and you saw photographs earlier. As part of the one-year planning permission granted last year, £30,000 was secured and allocated towards pavement improvement works. Going forward, a further £110,000 will now also be secured over the next 4 years towards improvement works to the pavement, and these will be secured by a unilateral undertaking legal agreement. 2 trees will also be planted as biodiversity net gain. We welcome the Planning Officer's recommendation of approval, and we urge you to vote in support of this application, which will allow the wheel to return for the next 4 years. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Pope. So, committee members, I'll now invite questions to the Planning Officer. Please, may I remind members, questions should only cover matters not raised in the presentation. Any members? Councillor Fox.
Thank you, Chair. I've got 4 questions, if I may. The first one is on the fact that it's less than substantial harm. And I just wonder in that case why Heritage England is so, to put it in the colloquial, worked up if the harm is less than substantial. That's my first question. The second one is on the works, the specified works, and I wonder if we've heard a little bit about that from the Planning Officer. Linked to that, I just wonder whether there's any work being done in relation to disabled access, and I'm thinking particularly of the circular area in the middle of the gardens, which can only go down by steps. And is there any possibility of a ramp? I find it quite frustrating having a disabled wife that I have to always wheel her around rather than her being able to enjoy the centre. And my last question, is there any idea or quantification of the beneficial impact on tourism caused by the wheel? Do we have any figures, or is it all just guesswork?
Thank you. Obviously, Historic England's position in terms of the wheel is quite consistent over the years. They've never sort of eared away from there being harm, and obviously harm should be given great weight to the designated heritage assets. So their position obviously is that the harm isn't mitigated, and hence the development is unacceptable per se. So the level of their objection, it's hard to sort of explain beyond that, other than they say that it's not justified in that location.
I want to just say in response to that, if I may, Chair, is there clearly is some mitigation that's being carried out, quite positive mitigation. We've heard this. Have Heritage England taken any of that, or Historic England taken any of that into consideration?
Councillor Fox, yeah. We work very closely with Historic England, and it's about triangulating our current position. So we've got our heritage strategy, which was adopted. We're reviewing our conservation area appraisals. We've got Torbay Vision looking at each town and kind of triangulating that with the master plan. And I think there's a kind of a clear narrative, and it's something that Historic England have always stayed with that position. That's why it's got to the conclusion that there is mitigation payment needed. And I think that the heart of that question is around what happens with that master plan and thinking long term. So it's identified the pathways now, but we should work on a master plan, I think, for the future and make sure we get that buy-in and we continue that trust with Historic England. So it's about that narrative, a bit more about place. So we're considering here that tight red line boundary of the wheel, but actually it's much more than that. Historic England, we're also considering the listed water fountain, the war memorial, which has been delivered at really high quality in terms of renovation, but also our work, the council's work at the pavilion, the Strand, public realm, and it's a much wider kind of place approach. I think that goes quite a long way in terms of Historic England. So they've kind of touched on it, and they have identified harm, but the mitigation's there. We've got that trust they'll deliver high quality repairs and restoration, but also that leads on to that master plan. Now that will be critical in the future, if that answers your question.
Could you just repeat your second question? Sorry, Councillor.
My second question is linked to my third, and it's about the details of the works that are being done in mitigation. And my kind of linked to that, my third question was how much of that is addressing disability? And the particular example I gave is that there's no way down apart from steps into the central circle garden area. It's quite a big area, and it would certainly, for somebody who has a disabled wife, it's quite frustrating to have to wheel her all the way round. It would be nice to still be able to get her down in the middle at some stage.
Yeah, so just in terms of the detail, I don't think really we're at a position in terms of the specific design of the resurfacing. Obviously, there's an there's a updated master plan that identifies the extent of works, the potential new vision for the surfacing, but the detail of what comes forward to that effect isn't worked up at the moment. And in terms of the works to the banjo area, that's so that's not identified as part of the strategy for the mitigation for this proposed 4-year temporary consent. It might be something that comes forward through the longer term management when it's refreshed.
I think I was just going to add to that we've spoken about those separate sites and significance and important, but the pathway is kind of the glue that binds everything together. So, you know, to have that higher quality material would have disability accessibility benefits, but I think that goes on about conservation area appraisals as well, that there's other things we could do, interpretation, better surfacing, thinking it clearly in terms of movement of people. It's a pedestrian focused place, so I think that can come later.
A final question was on the, if you like, what's the impact in financial terms? Have we quantified exactly how important this is? We get a lot of talk about it being important. Is there any kind of evidence backing that up?
In short answer, there is no detailed evidence. As you said, it's probably something that's quite hard to quantify and pin down. Obviously, there is a lot of sort of comments around it being iconic, the sort of social media presence of it. But in terms of quantifiable evidence, there's nothing presented, and I'd imagine it'd be quite a hard task, to be honest.
I think the only thing I'd add to that is that we've used the sort of phrase iconic and imagery, and it's surprising how many front covers of documents and photograph opportunities and artwork we've seen with the wheel in place. So the perception of it is there. It's hard to quantify some figures, but I think, Scott, you've had some feedback from some tourism groups that it is incredibly important to that offer.
Councillor Darling. Mandy. M.
Thank you. Is it on? Thank you. Mine's just a quick question about the economic of the projects and also the finances that would come towards heritage. So last year, I think we gained 30,000 from the wheel that were put into surfacing things. The project is going to give 110,000 over the 4 years. 2 of those years are 30, but 2 are 25. Is there any reason why it's not 30 every year? Because surely the value will go up rather than down.
So there's nothing presented why, obviously it's presented as a overall figure of £110,000 split over 4 years with those different figures rather than equally. Yes, the first 2 years match previous years. I think previously there has been some subtle variances within the level of obligation. So I think it's been down as low as 20. It's been higher than 30 certainly in some of the earlier wheels. So Historically, there's been some variation. Looking at it as a whole, in terms of the overall sum, it was considered obviously acceptable on balance when considering the planning history, including last year's decision. But particular reasoning behind the split 30-30, 25-25, that's not been presented.
Thank you.
Councillor Billings.
Thank you, Chair. In relation to the heritage benefits, we're being offered £110,000 through a unilateral undertaking. Do we have an understanding about what of the works set out in the master plan that would actually fund? Because there's a phase 1 resurfacing through resin-bound aggregate. There's also a phase 2 in relation to replacing what I presume is concrete octagonal paving slabs with a granite. Is it funding both of those or just some of those, or do we not have full clarity, please?
So last year's 1-year consent provided some partial funding for the resurfacing. So this scheme should deliver certainty on fully funding that internal network proposals. Obviously, the master plan presents 4 or 5 different options in terms of improvement works, including what you've just mentioned, also improvements to interpretation and signage in the area. So I suppose it's to go towards works within that sort of supported master plan. How the council wants to bring those forward, if they want, I suppose it's for future discussion in terms of what we want to see prioritised out of any surplus. But it would obviously see that the internal servicing scheme would be able to be delivered in full now.
So just to clarify that last bit, Mr. Jones, so the costs of the resin-bound aggregate surfacing to replace the red tarmac with the beige or sand-coloured resin-bound aggregate, we think that's sufficiently provided through this undertaking in addition to funds from previous years. Is that correct?
So from memory, I think the scheme was there's an approximate costing of around £90,000. Please forgive me if I'm wrong, but that was an estimate from last year. So yeah, it should deliver.
That's helpful. And then turning to the actual response from Heritage England, they talk about, from their perspective, it being really important to allocate all revenue from the project to heritage benefits. Is there a rental payment that the council's receiving for the land in addition to the unilateral undertaking, if we're interpreting revenue correctly? Or is that something beyond this committee's understanding?
Well, there will be a broader rental yield that obviously between the operators and the council, but in terms of the planning permission and the obligation, that's the figures that we're talking about in terms of mitigating the impact.
And in terms of the life expectancy of the resin-bound surfacing, this permission is for a temporary period of 4 years. When I've looked on Google, the life expectancy of resin-bound surfacing suggests 15 to 25 years, going up to 30. Does that seem reasonable to you from your understanding of it, please?
I'm not a surfacing expert, so I wouldn't be able to answer that, I'm afraid.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Billings. Colleagues, any other questions? Councillor Tolshard.
Thank you, Chair. There's restrictions in places to the hours of operation and when the wheel is lit. There's somewhere in the report was mention of noise. I can't find it now, but I just wondered if there are any measures in place to mitigate the impact of noise. I think it was music that there was specifically mentioned. Thank you.
Yeah, so the development itself is obviously for a wheel and the cafe and ticket office. So having discussed this with environmental health colleagues, there is a suggested informative just to remind the applicants about the impacts of noise nuisance and matters that can be addressed under that, separate legislation to that. But there's not a proposed condition which would be tricky to deliver and monitor. So there's separate legislation that could be dealt with that.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
If colleagues haven't got any questions, I've just got one, Scott, on page 19 at the bottom sentence. Scott, this obligation will be paid across 4 years with 30,000 paid in 2024 and 2025 and 25,000 in 27, 28. I just want to make sure that that was obviously a typo, and you know we're all covered, and the applicant, if we're minded to give approval, they don't miss out on the 2026 payment.
Yes, well spotted. That is a typing error on the year. So the obligations would be set out in the legal agreement, which would be 2025 to 28 inclusive. So yeah, not 24 as per the committee report error.
Thank you. Colleagues, any? No? Well, I'll open up the applicant for debate. Councillor Bye.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just very much hope that colleagues will support this application. I've been sat here looking, of course, at the picture of the wheel. And to me, it complements the setting. So some of these observations, and although I greatly respect Historic England's advice, it must be subjective. To me, the key thing is this is a core tourism investment area. The wheel is exactly what you would expect to find in a tourism area. I thought in the presentation it was interesting to see the picture of the back of the Princess Theatre, which looked very uninteresting without the wheel there to bring life to the setting. So the great circle of the wheel, to me, enhances the setting. It reflects the circles of the banjo, a lot of the circular features of the pavilion and the historic fountain. We know that visitors very much enjoy it, residents very much enjoy it. I'm always sad at the end of the year or the end of the season when it goes, because it feels, well, that's it for a year. And I'm always excited when it comes back. It's great for Torquay. I hate that word iconic. I don't like the word iconic, but I think it's very, very special. It enhances the setting. It's good for tourism. It lifts the spirits. Let's see it for 4 years. That's great to give it that security for 4 years. So I hope colleagues will support it.
Councillor Billings.
How do I follow that, Chair? I totally agree with Councillor Bye that there's an economic benefit for the Bay and that it resonates with our tourism offer. But I don't think we need to balance that against a heritage impact and a heritage harm. Because I think if we just look at heritage, I think there's a net benefit in my own personal view. Let me explain why. So we're told in the papers that there's 2,228 square metres of red, broken tarmac, which I think looks inappropriate in an important listed park and garden setting. I think it looks out of context. I don't think it's something we would put in by choice now. We've got the opportunity to receive 110,000 of unilateral undertaking monies, which our officers indicate it would probably do the entire amount. That would seem reasonable, dividing 110 by 2,228, or the other way around even. It's about £40 a square metre. That seems an amount that would do that large area. And as my questions earlier alluded to, that benefit's going to accrue throughout the lifetime of that resurfacing works, which isn't the 4 years of this temporary consent, but is 15, 25 years, or however long that new resin-bound surfacing that would have a more traditional surface finish, a more traditional colour aesthetic, will be there for. So, recognising we've got a wheel that from a pure heritage context is out of place in these gardens, there's in my mind a complete offset in heritage terms, in terms of the benefit of the surfacing and the materials that will significantly outlast the time period of this temporary consent. Added to that, the presence of the wheel, in my view, will draw people into the gardens themselves. Encouraging people to experience that heritage asset will, in my mind, enhance the quality of the asset because it increases appreciation of it in society, and people experience it more. So from a pure heritage position, I have a different view as to historic England as to whether there's harm or not. Because of these offsets, because of the enhanced footfall where people appreciate it, and because of the long-term improvement in the surface finish. So whilst I totally agree with Councillor Bye that there's a benefit that one would have to weigh out, even if you didn't get to the same position I am, I actually don't think in pure heritage terms that there's harm when we take the aggregate of all of the different aspects. On its own, I can see how the presence of the wheel and the wheel alone has a negative heritage impact. But I think put together with the package of these important surfacing works, because I'm not quite sure whether members have all sort of got in their minds the very damaged pavement and tarmac that I'm thinking about and trying to describe. It simply doesn't look what one would want in a prime seafront location for a resort that has such an importance on its tourism offer as Torbay, and it's certainly what I'd want to see in listed parks and gardens anywhere. So I would totally encourage members to support this, but I would take the view that not only do I think there's an economic benefit, I don't think taking the totality there's a heritage harm.
Councillor Fox.
Just following on from Councillor Nick Bye in particular, it just strikes me that it's a real eyesore when you look at the eastern elevation of Princess Theatre, and that really, in my view, detracts from the gardens, and there seems to be no mention of that. If there is, forgive me. But I think this kind of acts, the wheel kind of acts as a foil to that, and in fact mitigates that particular quite destructive impact. That's the first of 3 points I want to make. Second one, nobody's mentioned there's views from the wheel looking down on this. You get a new perspective on how beautiful this area is. So the wheel enables extra appreciation of this area. And I think the mitigation, my final point, the mitigation benefits I think are quite significant. I've heard Councillor Billings talking on about the footpaths and the quality of them now, and I think that's a really important point. And I think it's slightly ungenerous of Historic England not to sort of give some sort of cognizance of this, because it's an important point in itself. So I think there are also important mitigating facts in this, whether or not we feel the wheel is an overall beneficial impact in townscape heritage terms or not. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Fox. I think, it's quite enjoyable following four good councillors and their opinions. With Councillor Bye on the economic, I have to say I err with Councillor Billings on it's not just the balance. And last time we looked at this, you know, I think it downplayed the economics and upplayed the heritage. I think we got it right here. Now we're upplaying the economics, but I think we maybe have upplayed the heritage still. But I think we might tackle that over the next couple of years as we try and plan a way forward, because we don't want to be in this same boat or this same wheel in 4 years' time. But I wanted to just say a few words to help Councillor Fox, I think, on the quantifiability of economics. I mean, tourism is Torbay's primary economic sector from the private sector point of view. I mean, the last figures I looked at, it was nearly £500 million coming into Torbay. And to give that context, that's 4 times the council's net budget. I mean, it's massive. You know, and we employ 10,000 residents, Torquay residents, Torbay residents, I should say, in that sector. And I was trying to think, how do you quantify then what a wheel brings? I mean, we have award-winning beaches, we have award-winning parks, but the advertising it, the area, you need these spectacular pictures that captures the person who's looking. They don't go on words, they look on spectacular pictures, and we've used this wheel and its beautiful pictures for years as an area to pull in the 4-5 million visitors that we need each year to sustain all our businesses. So I don't think we can fully quantify what a wheel does, Councillor Fox, but my analogy would be a bit like if we said no, we wouldn't be taking out the striker in a football team, but we probably could be taking out a winger. You can't underestimate what this wheel and the impact it does nationally and internationally in advertising. So I think we haven't even scratched the surface on the actual economic benefit of it, frankly. But I'm really pleased that we got a better recommendation this time, and doesn't cause us too much grief, subject to everybody's approval. So if nobody else has got any other words to say, I'd actually be delighted to propose this one, and Councillor Fox to second it. We've got all the conditions. I don't think we need to read those out. All those in favour?
That's unanimous, Chair.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Yes, it has, sir. Thank you very much. That's all I came for. Perfect timing. Well done. Thank you. So we only had one item today, committee, but thank you very much. Very important. Thank you for public who are watching. Thank you, officers, for your time and professionalism. I'll now call this meeting to end.